Oh, I have to sneeze again. Nope, it's gone. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, please do hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it so that you are notified every time that I post on Mondays and Thursdays. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing something new called the book look, where I'm just going to be doing my makeup as well as reviewing a book or doing a summary on a book, talking about my thoughts, and just doing my makeup. It might just be my everyday makeup. It might be a look inspired by the book. And for these book looks, I'm going to try to be doing them on the last Thursday of every month. So there's a whole month to read the book. I will be announcing the book for the next month in this video, so you guys can feel free to read along and join me with the book for next month. So this month I read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I had never actually read this book before, and I hadn't seen any like movie adaptations until the one that recently came out. I think it was like in December, and I saw that with a friend because this is like her favorite book, and I saw it and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a very cute story, and that inspired me to read the book, and I'll tell you my thoughts. So this version is the Signet Classics. It is about 500 pages. So to begin, I would just kind of like to talk about the different characters in the story. It follows really just like these four girls who are all sisters. Their dad, Mr. March, he is away serving in the military. When he first got married, they were, you know, wealthier, and then something happened, which I don't really remember what it was, but something happened where they lost all of their money and they were kind of living in poverty. And at that time they had already had their first child, Meg. So she had kind of lived in that luxury style and growing up as a kid, and then had to transition to the poverty lifestyle. And she's really the only one that really reminisces on her experiences of the past. So throughout the book, she's just always trying to be in that kind of lifestyle. She has friends that are in that lifestyle, and she goes through different things throughout the book that just kind of relate to that. And then next we have Jo, and she is this like rambunctious girl who doesn't really, she's like clumsy. She knows that she's not very classy like her sisters are. Meg definitely knows how to be like a lady in this time period, and I believe that this book was written, I think, in the 1860s. So that's just kind of the time period we're working with. So she feels different from the rest of her peers, and she just definitely like acts out more than the other sisters and is more like tomboyish, I guess. She aspires to be a writer, and she's always writing stories, writing plays. And then the next oldest, I believe, is Beth, and she is this quiet, saint-like angel of a girl. She's always at home. She's very quiet, very, you know, such a homebody. She and Jo get along the most. They're the ones who are always there for each other. And in the beginning of the book, she does get sick with scarlet fever, and Jo is there to comfort her and try to help her. And last, we have Amy, and she is a painter. As a child, she is I don't know. She likes to use big words, even if she doesn't pronounce them correctly or doesn't really know the meaning of them. She's kind of like Meg in the aspect that she is very trying to be ladylike and tries to live that lap of luxury lifestyle. So the book is actually 2 parts, and the first part is when they are kids. I believe Amy, who's the youngest, is like 12 in the beginning, and then Meg is like 17. And it starts off, I think it starts off, it's around Christmas time, and their dad is still away at war. They're kind of talking about how they do live in poverty and how, you know, they should be not spending their money on themselves, but be spending it on gifts for like their mom. And then they go down, and there's this like breakfast feast that is all set up on their dining table. And then their mom comes home and says that they have to pack up their food because she met this poor family who is worse off than they are, has a like newborn baby. She says that they would be better off with their breakfast than they would. So they, of course, listen to her and gather all of the food and take it over to this little family. Then their neighbor, Mr. Lawrence, who is actually this really rich guy, like old rich guy, he notices their kind gesture, and so by the time that they get home, there's a whole nother feast ready for them, which their neighbor had set up just because he is rich and thought that they deserved a good meal. He has his grandson living with him, who I think is around Jo's age or like a little younger than Meg, and his name is Teddy? Lori? He goes by both Teddy and Lori. He's a big person in this story. He and Joe are become like best friends. They're always there for each other. But in the beginning part, the first part where they're all children, a lot of different things happen. Like I said, Beth gets scarlet fever. Joe and Lori become best friends, has a scholar who just teaches him, I don't know, school, I guess. His name is Mr. Brooke, and he kind of takes a liking to Meg and kind of, I don't know, it felt weirdly written the way it was. Just he kind of like forced the love there when like I guess she had feelings or whatever, but it felt weird to me. He's older, but again, in like the 1860s that didn't really matter, so whatever. There's also an important scene. Meg and Joe were going with Lori and some of his friends to a movie, and Amy really wanted to go, but Joe and Meg both said no and kind of like shoved her to make sure she would stay home. And she was really upset about that. She said that she would get Joe back, and so what she did was she took one of Joe's like most prized stories that she'd written, and she takes that and burns it, which obviously did not go over well with Beth, or did not go over well with Joe. This summary is just not going well. And so Joe kind of like, I don't know, gives Amy the cold shoulder, and Amy's trying to like make amends. She feels obviously really bad about it. She had a talking to with her mom, and she realized like the wrong that she had committed. And then a day comes where Joe and Lori go ice skating, and Amy really wants to go with, so she tells them to wait up, but they don't, and Joe's still kind of giving her the cold shoulder, and the place that they skate isn't like fully frozen yet, so Lori tells Joe to stick to the edges where it's more solidified. It told her, and she did not relay that message to Amy, and Amy falls through the ice and almost catches like pneumonia or something. And so then Joe kind of feels bad, saying that it would have been her fault had Amy died and all this stuff. So you kind of understand the sisters' relationships and just their childlike sibling relationships that they have. So by the end of the first part, we realize that Meg and Mr. Brooke are going to be married. Beth she got over scarlet fever and she's like healthy now, but I don't know, there's always something with her that she just feels sick and weak. And Joe's continuing writing her stories, and she's getting money for them from newspaper. Why did I say that like that? From the newspaper. Finally, Amy is invited by one of her rich aunts to go to Rome and Paris with her because she wants her to study, and Amy being a painter, she just learns her skill better there. Second part is actually kind of more of a summary of the rest of their lives, so it takes like decades to go through the whole story, but you eventually learn that Amy is doing really well in the high society, and she has this boy that she met that she says that even though she doesn't love him, she thinks she can grow to love him, so if he proposes, she will say yes. And he's one of the like very wealthy families. They kind of knew that family when they were kids because they were Lori's friends, so she feels pretty set in that decision. But then Lori shows up. Oh, okay. So first Lori proposed to Joe, and Joe was not having it because she said she didn't love him. She didn't want to be in that kind of relationship with him. She just wanted to stay friends, and that pretty much broke Lori. And so he went abroad with his grandpa, and that's where he ran into Amy, and he realized that really the only other person that he could love in his life is Amy. So he and Amy get engaged. Joe actually moves to New York, and she becomes a writer there. She's kind of like a governess in a house as well, where she meets this guy called the Professor, and he's like 40 years old, so he's like 20 years older than she is. But they kind of fall in love, and they have this like friendship thing going on. Then she is told something about her writing, how it's like trash, and she just doesn't see the point in it if nobody likes it, but she just writing for money. So she goes home and finds out that Beth is sick. And so she tries to make the days last with Beth, and Beth is just kind of coming to terms with the fact that she's dying. And then it gets really sad when she dies. It's a low point, but it's a real point in the book and the story. And so while Beth is sick and dying, her parents and family decide not to tell Amy because they want Amy to stay in wherever she's at, Paris or whatever. and they want her to have like the best time she can, and so they don't want to keep her thoughts down with that news. And also in the time that Amy is away, Meg has 2 kids, twins, with Mr. Brooke. She's adjusting to the life of being a wife and home woman, I don't know. So she's getting used to that life, and Mr. Brooke is kind of helping her in that regard. I don't really know. I'm not a huge fan of Meg and Mr. Brooke. Just not a fan. But then eventually Amy does come home, and by that point she and Laurie are already married, and it's just kind of, it's like a happy reunion but also a sad reunion because Beth isn't there. And they all meet Joe's friend at the professor, and they realize that he's actually a really cool guy and they wouldn't mind if she married him, but she's still kind of up in the air because she's a very feminist woman in 1860. Then she does end up marrying him and just living a good life. One of her rich aunts dies and gives her the estate that she lived on, and so Joe and her husband now run like a boys boarding school, and she's very happy, Meg's happy, Amy is happy. They just all kind of miss Beth. And yeah, that was a very rough, crazy, out of order summary. Next, I'd like to talk about like my thoughts on the book, because I think it's just a beautiful story, and it's really interesting to hear that Louisa May Alcott kind of wrote it as a memoir, but it's more like a fictional memoir. So she is kind of Joe in this story, and she does have 3 sisters, or 2 sisters. Her parents kind of lived in poverty after a while too, so she kind of modeled the book and story after her own life. And in that time it was really interesting because not a lot of female characters were leads in any stories. They were more kind of in the background, or just there weren't any leading ladies in that time period. So she kind of created the first book to have that. And I think that's really interesting, and how she did relate it to her life, and she wasn't afraid of the hardships. So she did keep in all the sad parts with Beth. And I just think if you read the book, you'll just notice that all of the female characters are just, I don't know, they're so interesting, especially Marmee, who's the mom, and Joe, just because they are these strong female characters, and especially Joe because she doesn't conform to the typical female role, I guess, in the household. And something that I thought was interesting when you compare the book, or Louisa May Alcott's life story, compared to the movie, was that in the movie, instead of Joe just writing any of her stories, she is actually writing Little Women. It's really funny because there's a part where the editor guy is like, oh no, I can't accept this. They all need to marry in the end. And that was something that Louisa May Alcott did not believe. So she even had said at one point after writing the first part that she was not going to have Joe and Laurie marry, just because she just didn't want to like please everybody in that way. She kind of wanted to be a little different. And because she was basing Joe off herself, and she herself did not marry, she just kind of added it in there just for like an overall happy ending, I guess. But I liked how they put that in the movie, because that wasn't in the book itself. But it was a good point, and like a nod to Louisa May Alcott herself. And even though this story took place in 1860, it's still pretty relevant, not relevant, but like relatable today. Whereas like you can, if you have siblings and you have sisters, like just those relationships are very similar. The only thing I would say that's like outdated is the whole like female role in the house, and just like the ladylike responsibilities, I guess, and the way that women have to act. And it is a really cute story, and I really did enjoy it, and I really think that if you have ever wanted to read it, you should. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think you would too. So now I'm just gonna be putting on blush, and I guess I will make it inspired by like 1860 style. They put like a lot of blush on their cheeks. They have really red cheeks, at least in like paintings and things. I did cry at the movie just because Beth's death, and like Beth has a character, she's just this perfect child, and she has so much care. And the way she actually got scarlet fever was she went back to visit that family that they had originally given that Christmas dinner to, breakfast, whatever it was. None of her sisters were gonna come. She begged them to come, saying that the baby was sick and that, you know, she needed someone else to go with her, that she would feel really grateful. They all said no, that she'd go by herself. So she did, and she came back saying that the baby had died of scarlet fever. And immediately Jo feels so bad because she could have realized what it was and sent Beth away so Beth didn't get sick. So I think that is also what brings Jo closer to Beth, and Jo kind of ends up feeling responsible for Beth and her sickness and all of that. But they really did grow closer, and I think that the way that they portrayed her sickness and then her death in the movie was done really well. The first time Beth gets sick, Jo wakes up in the bed and Beth isn't there anymore. So she goes downstairs and there she is at the table, healthy, eating breakfast with her mom. And then when Beth dies, Jo wakes up again with the bed empty. She goes downstairs and it's just the mom at the table crying. And I just think, I don't know, for some reason that was so moving, the way that they did that. And I really liked how in the movie they kind of interchanged part 1 and part 2. So they kind of had between the flashbacks of when they were kids and the flash forwards of when they are adults, and just you kind of get bits and pieces here and there, and then you eventually do get the full story. Whereas with the book, you just keep reading in chronological order. But I did like that little twist that they put with all of the meshing of timelines. So yeah, if you read the book, go see the movie. If you saw the movie, go read the book. If you haven't done either, do both. It's a really great story and it would not be like a waste of time at all. Oh, almost forgot. The next book I'm going to be reading is called The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. And I'll just read the little insert here to kind of give you an idea of what this book is about, if you want to buy it, if you want to rent it, if you want to just read it for the next month. It says, the rules are simple. Number 1, tell a lie. Number 2, stick to your story. And number 3, never ever get caught. On a cool June morning, a woman is walking her dog in the idyllic coastal village of Salton along a tidal estuary known as the Reach. Before she can stop him, the dog charges into the water to retrieve what first appears to be a wayward stick, but to her horror turns out to be something much more sinister. The next morning, 3 women in and around London, Fatima, Thea, and Issa, received the text they had always hoped would never come, from the 4th of their formerly inseparable clique, Kate, that only says, I need you. The 4 girls were best friends at Salton, a second-rate boarding school set near the cliffs of the English Channel. Each different in their own way, the 4 become inseparable and were notorious for playing the lying game, telling lies at every turn to both fellow boarders and faculty. But their little game had consequences, and as the 4 converge in present-day Salton, they realized their shared past was not as safely buried as they had once hoped. Atmospheric, twisty, and with just the right amount of chill to keep you wrong-footed, The Lying Game is told in Ruth Ware's signature suspenseful style, lending itself to becoming another unput-downable thriller from the Agatha Christie of our time. This book was published in 2017, I believe, so definitely check this out if you want. I have never read this book, never really even heard much about it, so gonna join me in the next month. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. I don't know what else to say. I gotta rub my eye. Beautiful. Now, she just, like,